Alright, I am back with another Destiny 2 video now that there is actually some stuff to talk about. Today was the Act 2 live stream for the Revenant episodes, in case you forgot that was coming here, because they did all of the story content in, the first few hours of the first act, and now 6 weeks later, we are starting the second act with new story stuff, which I didn't talk about, and new activities and gear, which I did talk about. I'm not going to go into the whole, was this right or wrong to do the, spacing this way for the story? Because, ultimately it doesn't really matter at this point. This is the way the season's going. There's only one more episode after this anyway, and then they're not doing any more episodes with Frontiers, so whatever. I don't like it, but, we're almost done with this. So, this is essentially what appears to be the main event of this, episode here, where we obviously got the new version of Onslaught, which is not that much different than other Onslaught. New bosses, new in between rooms, new races, new maps. Okay, there is a lot of new stuff, but it's still it's still Onslaught. We got introduced to the potion mechanic, which I don't like because it's broken on one of my characters, and the tonics don't seem like they're working half the time, and it's kind of cumbersome. But now we are moving to the main attraction here, which is Tomb of Elders. And as you might expect, it is in fact a reprise of Prison of Elders. It was interesting because they made it sound like it absolutely is porting the actual tech, I think, and design from the original Prison of Elders in Destiny 1, obviously with a lot of modifications, but our good buddy Noah made it sound like it was kind of a technical haul to take the old version and bring it here. It doesn't seem like they just sort of remade it from scratch or anything. What this appears to be is a combination of Prison of the Elders and the Coil. The Coil being the kind of multi-stage, multi-objective, roguelite-ish activity from Season of the whatever that was, the one, the Savathun one. And that was an activity a lot of people really liked. They are bringing back the Coil for, these featured activities in Frontiers. Obviously, I think they are going to put something like Tomb of Elders in that as well. They're putting Onslaught in that. They're kind of making these new big categories of activities other than just Strikes, Gambit, Crucible. They're doing more of these types of things. This one is interesting in the sense that it has, familiar mechanics, but also a lot more modifiers, a lot more objectives, all sort of reworked races, like the harder versions of the Hive and Cabal, and then the Dread are in there. Some of the bosses will have the same names. Psylocke returns, and they'll come back and function differently. That appears to be the case here. There are kind of traversal segments like the Coil had, but not just tiptoeing around spike traps. They do seem to be at least a little more combat focused. They are really digging into this idea of the more kind of efficient you are at, performing well in these activities, the faster you can get it done. They talked about doing a run of 28 to 30 minutes to get the most loot possible. And that's because if you perform really well, you can skip some of the kind of in between sections or, get timers down to complete things faster. And that looked, like a good change there. I think one of the issues I've had lately with some of these activities, even if they're good, they're just so long. A full run of the Coil was really long, and now Onslaught, this has been this with the first Onslaught, but a full 50 wave run of Onslaught is 60 to 70 minutes automatically, because it's not just about oh, I'm so good, I'm clearing all these things. Between wave spawning and just the timers and the way it's broken up, you can't do it faster. It's just not. It's not possible, to the point where I actually saw DMG responding to someone who's saying that, 10 waves is too short, 50 waves is too long, do 30 waves. And he's like, oh, the team is aware of this feedback. So we'll see if they ever knock that down anymore. But I'm glad to hear that this activity seems to be something that can both be fun and loot heavy, but also not super, super long. We have long activities, long-ish anyway, depending on the dungeon or the exotic missions or the raids. And if you want to do long missions, you can kind of team up and do some of those. But for seasonal stuff like this, I would prefer them to be shorter. So this idea that you can get through these at a decent clip is fun. It looks really interesting, honestly. Obviously, everybody really loves Prison of Elders, and this is one of those things that players were hoping would be revived at some point in the future. Obviously, we appear to be done reprising raids and things. It doesn't feel like we're ever going to get Wrath of the Machine, but Prison is obviously not a raid, but it did have a crazy hard mode at first that was like really brutal. I'm not sure about what the difficulty is going to be like here. If there's like, it doesn't seem like there's like GM difficulty of this, but it is something that feels like something that should have been reprised, and it's a little surprising it took this long, but they do seem to have done a good job on it. Obviously, we're going to have to actually play it to find out. Some of the modifiers that people don't like are in this, but then there's some cool stuff in there, like this idea of like, oh, we're going to flood the arena with poison gas and you have to like shut it off. And it seems, I guess, more creative than, the past version, which was limited by kind of D1 limitations. But this time around, if they can successfully combine Prison with Coil and make it not, some interminably long thing, I think that's a great idea. And hopefully the loot is copious enough to match that. Hopefully that is a better way to farm loot than Onslaught, which I think is not in a great place right now. That's another discussion for maybe tomorrow. Besides that, they showed off a couple of new weapons. There's an SMG. There is Dustrock Blues coming back, but it's not Dustrock Blues. It's a different shotgun. They are bringing back Grid Skipper from Season of the Splicer. In addition, they already brought back Chroma Rush and the shotgun, Sojourner's Tale, so it's called. So that's coming back too. They roll out these weapons in phases, which, again, we can debate if that's good or not. And then they went over briefly some of the new artifact perks. They're mostly kind of melee focused. The big last column one is like doing more arc damage against blinded targets, which I feel like that's not going to be many people's last column slot here. So those don't look super, super game changing. Past that, they had Dylan talk about some, upcoming loot and activities and things. Mainly talked about the Dawning, how the Dawning's coming back. They showed some pretty cool dragon-themed armor for the Dawning, which I think is way better than the Wizards we just got for Festival. Looks very cool. I've kind of been spacing on a lot of the Eververse armor lately, but that I'm going to have to get that. Dawning armor is always amazing. Dawning armor is some of my favorite sets, like every year. And they previewed a Street Fighter crossover, which has a bunch of Street Fighter ghosts. There's a Blanca face universal ornament and some emotes. It's a very strange crossover. I think they've done at least one or two of these where it's not like a full crossover, like armor and stuff, but this is random. I don't know. None of that seems terribly appealing to me. There's also a new Doki Doki set coming. I think that's just going to be thrown in Eververse. I guess we're getting 2 Eververse sets an episode or something, but you can buy it for Bright Dust. And also in the Dawning, he went over the new weapon, which is I think it's a Void Linear Fusion 3-burst, which can have Withering Gaze and Bait and Switch. So I don't know. That could be really good, potentially. Oh, hi, Evie. Depending on how, the meta shakes out with linear fusion rifles these days. But, and then they previewed at the very end that there is a new exotic mission coming in Act 3 here, and that will be, you get what's called Slayer's something, but it's a Void shotgun that's like powered by a Void crystal that it turns into like a scatter arrow type thing. I'm not 100% clear on if it's going to be good or not. It looks a little odd to me, but they're doing the whole thing about, catalysts and intrinsics. It's the usual sort of exotic thing they do now. I think they've been doing really good with their exotic missions, and Evie really wanted to be in this video. Evie, don't eat my headphones. Okay. And so that, they said they're not going to talk about that more because the next live stream period would be during like the holidays. So we'll just get that. It does sound like Tomb of the Elders is going to be the big release of this whole episode. In some ways it makes me wish they kind of launched with it. And I'm not going to go on a whole tangent about the health of Destiny right now and whatever. Player count's actually like pretty decent in terms of retention. I've been tracking a little bit. Anyway, I just said I wasn't going to do it. But yeah, so I'm just coming back after a zillion hours of Dragon Age, and I'm certainly going to be back for Act 2, beat all the story stuff in 2 hours, and then see how farming Tomb of Elders goes. And then yeah, tomorrow let's have a crafting versus no crafting debate about the seasonal weapons here, because I have plenty to say about that, given that I've been hearing about that a lot. So anyway, cool stream. I think it went really well. Shout out to Noah Lee, who is so good on these streams. Like he's fantastic. Like he's probably the best, forward-facing Bungie person we've seen in a very long time. So keep him on all the streams. He's great. He's very his passion is infectious. So very cool. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.